Good afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome to all of you. You are all heroes. You made it to the hero room, and we thank you for that in the afternoon to a parallel session, but you will not regret it. It will be an exciting panel, and you will learn a lot, and we will exchange a lot about, of course, artificial intelligence as a tool for judicial actors, promoting access to justice, human rights, and the rule of law. And some of you know that UNESCO has built over 10 years a large network of judicial operators, which we have been training at 35,000 altogether on, for example, freedom of expression and access to information and human rights law in this domain and the application. And just 2 or 3 years ago, many said, okay, can you do something on digital and AI? Because I wanted to learn more about it. We did a survey and responded with a MOOC, which had in the first 5 weeks 4,000 people who went through it, and the Supreme Court judge from India wrote to our Director General how fantastic it is. So it gave us a lot of drive and energy, and also opportunities, of course, to continue. And we have built from that and have developed a global toolkit, which is still in draft format, but I want to show it to all of you who are interested, because you can learn a lot of things in this toolkit. And it is accessible. We have tested it in 3 regions so far. The last time with 18 countries in Latin America, but it is still not the final version. But it is already very rich for those who want to learn more about it. Today, I have the privilege and pleasure to have a high, very qualified panel and series of panelists with me. We're still missing Selina, whom some of you might know too, will join us in a second. And I will, without further ado, I will introduce to you the panel, or will just with the names and the moment the panelists will speak, I will say a few more words on them. So we have on the left John Taylor, or I will say just now, who is of course one of the real machine learning professors, and also an AI chair for UNESCO, but also the director of ERCAI, the UNESCO center in Slovenia. So thank you for joining us, and he will give us an opening remark in a few seconds. So I could hand over to you now for the opening remarks, and we'll introduce them later. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to say maybe a few words about the ERCAI Center. So it's as was mentioned, it's a Category 2 center, UNESCO Category 2 center, dedicated to AI and sustainable development. So it sees as its remit, in a sense, trying to promote the rethinking of AI in terms of understanding what it can do for humanity rather than what it can do for particular businesses. And I think one of those areas clearly is the judicial, but I think more broadly our aim is to promote understanding of AI in the general public and the benefits that AI can bring, but also the dangers, and how we need to rethink perhaps some of the judicial approaches in order to address those dangers, or to offset or head off at the pass those dangers. So one of our core thinking is around the ethics of AI and trying to understand how we can build a better understanding of ethics of AI that is practical, that is implementable. And I think in some sense, our center is trying to bridge the technical, in that we are bringing technical people to the table with the implications of the applications, be they practical medical applications or climate applications or in the judiciary. So in a sense, perhaps I would just add one sort of thought that I don't really consider myself a panelist here. I'm just saying some introductory remarks, but I'll chip in if I can. But as I don't consider myself a judicial expert, but what I would say is, let's not fall into the mistake of thinking that AI is a finished subject or a finished discipline, and that we have to work with what we have and make that just the thinking fixed into that particular set of systems that we have before us. Those systems have been developed with particular interests, typically a commercial interest, and they may not be the best way of designing a system if we were to think of it from approaching from an ethical or an initial ab initio stance. So I would encourage us all to think about what we would like AI systems to exhibit in terms of their properties and operation, in order to make them more fit for purpose for the particular application, and in this case, let's say the judiciary. And I think that many researchers would be very welcoming of input from people with domain knowledge in order to understand what the desiderata are, what is the thing that we should be looking to develop, and that, you know, AI is a very, as I say, fast-moving subject, and maybe there will be the potential to develop solutions that would deliver a better result for judicial applications than the ones that we have at the moment. So I'll finish with that thought.
Thank you, John, so much for these opening remarks. And we will be speaking about both the opportunities and threats, and of course the need to strengthen the capacities of the judiciary. But all of you will be delighted to hear that applications exist. So today you will first learn about conceptual approaches. So which areas can be in the judiciary be enhanced through AI. But we will then also speak about the technical aspects very briefly, and concrete implementation and application, and then going back to some governance principles. So we will cover a lot of different domains, including practical applications. So I think that everybody will enjoy. And I invite now immediately Gregor Strugin to introduce us to the also conceptual, technical, and implementation related operational issues, and set the floor like that. And just to introduce you, so Gregor is a specialist IT and IP law lawyer, and he worked at the crossroad of technology, information, and law since 2002, and primarily at the Supreme Court of Slovenia, but also as state secretary at the Ministry of Justice. He's the vice chair of the Council of Europe's Committee on AI, former chair of KAI, and the Slovenian representative to the European Commission on the Efficiency of Justice, and the CyberJust working group. So he has a very good experience and backgrounds of over 20 years, and will give us and set the floor in terms of the conceptual and the technical and operational issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric, and hello. I'm happy that the room filled up despite they put us in the cellar. AI is a general purpose technology, and any sectoral discussion requires us to distinguish at least the following categories of issues within any ecosystem where it's used. And like Cedric said, conceptual, and we can also address technical and organizational issues. So let us start with conceptual. Martin Luther King said that the true peace is not merely the absence of tension, but it's the presence of justice. Sounds good, right? But what is justice? We can have very different ideological views, and we can also look at it from the perspective of distributive versus procedural fairness. Do we look at the results in an objective manner? Everybody gets the same sentence regarding looking at objective elements, or are we looking at the outcome if the procedure was done correctly. Analysis in Slovene system, but also abroad, show that procedural fairness is more important than distributive fairness. But to avoid a sociological analysis, we can address it in a more operational manner. Justice as an effective dispute resolution process. And in order to see where AI can be used, we should first identify what are the current problems that are seeking solutions in dispute resolution. One is access to information, the other is speed, the third cost, then effectiveness of the tools available, predictability of success, security, sometimes also privacy of procedures. This is why many choose alternative dispute resolutions. Fairness rarely comes first, or even in top 5 or 10 elements of what users are seeking. It is subjective and dependent on the interests of the parties. What is fair for one is not usually fair for the other. Systems vary, but regardless of this, we can distinguish that we have different stakeholders, operators, and interests at play. And many operators in the existing system play the role of an intermediary. And some of these roles of intermediaries can be automated, are being automated and will be automated. We are already seeing this in traditional settings. For example, access to case law lowers the need for basic legal advice and orientation regarding how to proceed with an issue. Use of AI for research, analysis, and drafting changes the roles of assistants, both in attorneys' offices and in courts. Automation of different tasks improves administration and efficiency. Specific examples from Slovenia include speech-to-text. What used to take 4 times as long as the proceeding took to transcribe what was said is now done in 1/4 of this time. And you can use the human resources for other tasks. It can be used for data and information extraction, especially in large case files. It's being used for anonymization, case law search, knowledge-based utilization. Some of the approaches, however, are bordering on disruptive. We are seeing the impact of attorneys' use in the courtrooms, where they're using AI to adapt their cross-examination of witnesses on a micro level. They have a digitized case file, and examinations are usually used to show the trustworthiness of a witness and of a statement. And traditionally, it was done in a more conversational manner, but now it can be done in a way that it effectively disrupts the witness, because you can use AI to find the most appropriate response to the answer or reactions that you see in the interrogated or examined witness. And this is lowering the credibility of testifying witnesses and can affect the outcome of cases. It brings about the question of equality of arms, especially if just one side is using this. What's even more worrying for me, as somebody who has worked for a long time in development of tools for judges, is that now judges want to use the same tools. But to avoid details here, separately, but perhaps even more importantly though, is automated dispute resolution, which has been offered for quite a long time through major retailing platforms, but also other systems. They are lowering the number of consumer protection cases coming to the courts and employment dispute cases coming to the courts. And this is starting to overtake traditional judicial making. Of course, it's not necessarily related to AI, but we heard yesterday that we didn't address internet or digitization adequately in the past 30 years. So now we are starting to see some of the issues and we are equating them with AI. Maybe we have a chance now to solve some of them, or at least address them. Why is this? Here we can transfer our discussion into technical and organizational issues that are influencing development and deployment of the technology. Overall, and as a consequence, I would consider that inequality of arms is the key risk when it comes to the use of AI. Inequality of opportunities, or inequality in terms of equality in general between within the procedure that is traditionally set up to provide equality. But achieving this depends on the ability of the state as the one responsible for providing a system of rule of law to comprehensively address the issue through governance and regulation. Why? Not for regulation's sake itself, but if you want to have the ability of the state to limit some rights of case parties, for example, to prevent the attorneys to use such tools in the courtroom, you need to do it in a legal and equitable manner. So you need some sort of regulation to have a judge who can say you cannot use this, at least in Europe. Of course, we have different systems. What is also crucial is that we extend these rules to as wide part of the dispute resolution chain as possible. For 2 examples, 1, case law and access to legal information can be problematic if these systems are available but biased. For example, you can have a case law system with falsified case law in it, or biased case law depending on the user. Additional challenge, operational challenge for courts or state players who are developing simple operational and business level integration of solutions requires specific knowledge and understanding. And this starts with procurement, benchmarks, warranties, liabilities, post-deployment monitoring, and if needed, adaptation of the tools. And this is something that is often lacking in the public sector, but is prominent in the private sector, not on nation level, but globally. So what we are seeing is we could have global monopolies starting to dictate how dispute resolution is being performed in various nations. So these are just some of the questions coming from the conceptual, but also organizational and technical aspect.
Thank you so much, Gregor. And this is really an exciting presentation. You spoke about text to speech, speech to text, but also disruptive applications in terms of cross-examination and automated dispute resolution. Just to tell all of you, you will be invited to ask questions to the panelists. So be ready at a later point. We will make this an interactive sessions. I already would challenge some of the smaller things, that inequality of arms is the biggest challenge you said, but we will hear other panelists there too, and continue in the first place with the next panelist, and that will be Virgesh Fuda. Sorry, it will be Vanya Škorić, and I will introduce you now by highlighting that you're program director at the Netherlands-based European Center for Not-for-Profit Law, overseeing global and European engagement programs with 20 years of experience in legal analysis, research, litigation, and strategic campaigning. And I'm happy that we had this conceptual view and approach, but we'll now hear really about some of the implementation challenges and opportunities too. And I hand over to you directly.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. We'll try to make this as interactive as possible, so we'll go quickly into the implementation part here. And I'll start with a quote actually from this lovely book, the UNESCO's AI Global Toolkit for Judiciary, a shameless plug-in again for our moderator, that says human rights-based approach is essential to build trustworthy AI systems in public service delivery. And I couldn't agree more. So that's why I'll be framing this short intervention by merging human rights rights-based approach and the calls for investment into implementation processes that we heard yesterday and today from the main panel. And I'll build on the examples. I'll give just a couple of illustrative examples of the use of large language models in judiciary from the 2023 study in Latin America, where they looked at the main risks in the implementation. With findings showing that most of the judges that used ChatGPT, for example, to motivate their decisions did it without actually thoroughly examining whether the information was correct. Then one of the risks was automation bias and over-reliance on the answers. There was a lack of key information to assess whether the data sets were biased or caused discrimination in any way. There was no explicit trace in the decisions whether the judges effectively checked the responses as accurate coming from the AI model. And then there was also something that said judges would require significant time to actually check the correctness of some of the and validity of some of the AI-generated answers, which then questions the whole concept of, whether it's more effective to use AI or to not use it. And then there was also a new study by Stanford and the Institute for Human-Centered AI that was just released, I think, a week ago, that finds disturbing and pervasive errors among the three most popular LLM models on a wide range of legal tasks. So you can Google hallucinating law. It will bring up the study immediately, and it says that hallucinations rate ranges from 69 to 88% in response to specific legal queries for these models, and that the models often lack self-awareness about the errors. They tend to reinforce the incorrect assumptions. And again, the findings significantly question the reliability of LLMs in legal context and access to justice. So that begs the question, actually, maybe that John brought in the beginning, whether what is suited for the purpose, and whether what is on the market currently is actually the thing that is most suited for the goals that we are trying to achieve, and what can be done in terms of implementation and, what we heard this morning, the agile policy making. So the argument is not to use AI or large language models for supporting access to justice. The point is how to assess those systems or build those systems from design phase, including the examination and the testing and the impact assessment before its use. So when the potential impact can be mitigated or the human rights consequences have been thoroughly assessed, and then use adequate tools and measures to actually address them. And mind you, these tools and measures to address the impacts need not be technical alone. So the premise is that having a robust assessment ex ante, so before the use, can serve as a really strategic mechanism for governments and public institutions to really build responsible use of AI. And of course, having in mind that necessity and proportionality are the key and ultimate ratio here, depending on the context and the use case. And so there are some existing frameworks and a few methods floating around to assess how AI might impact human rights and all the issues that are at stake for the rule of law. In this toolkit, there are also included sections on impact assessment. However, what we see missing is a process within the public sector, how this is to be governed, what are the criteria for having a good, meaningful, robust impact assessment, how this process should be embedded, institutionalized, so how do we bridge that gap? And I would here echo what Gabriela Ramos actually said yesterday, and this was a call from her welcome note to invest in the government sector capabilities and capacities, to embed the safeguards for the safe use and implementation of AI. So to invest really in order to yield the benefits. And we would argue that by incorporating such robust criteria in AI impact assessment processes, and especially if they are embedded in the public procurement or public design of AI, this can be a proactive approach actually to AI accountability. And I have to say, in a collaboration with the Civic AI Lab at the University of Amsterdam, where I also do research, we did come up with the criteria for impact assessment with critical 5 components of these criteria. One is the normative framework, so having scope, content, benchmarks, and enforcement mechanism played out and laid out in rules. Second one is the process, so having the stages and procedures and roles of different stakeholders and assessment team independence really elaborated. The third one is methodology, so indicators, benchmarks, balancing, or what the industry likes to call the trade-offs, and what we lawyers like to call proportionality and necessity test. Then engagement, so identifying which stakeholders need to be engaged, the methods of engagement, how to include different external, in particular, stakeholders. And the fifth one is oversight, so documentation of the process, publication of the results and findings, communicating that to the public to build trust, monitoring and feedback. So I'll stop here, and I'll just say that my organization managed to advocate for some of that language to be incorporated in some of the policy processes that are ongoing regionally and globally. The latest one in the upcoming UN General Assembly resolution on AI. And we really hope that this can be a part of the kind of convergence process within different policy making areas and processes that are going on. And maybe something to think about for the UNESCO's readiness assessment process, whether that contains enough information for a robust impact assessment to help countries embed some of these criteria into their governance framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vanya. And just to mention here too, because you mentioned investment into capacity development in this domain, I would like to thank also the European Union who is supporting our project and this work. It is like something like a curriculum too. Just to acknowledge that here, and to thank you because you did very well in speaking about concrete implementation and then going to the ex ante, also before rollout assessments, very structured way, but looking at governance. And now we're coming back up to the high-level views to governance, and most of you have seen Sedina Ndiaye, before on different panels because he is a member of the UNSG's High-Level Advisory Board on AI. And many of you have seen also the interim report here on governing AI for humanity. But I will say the right things for your introduction too. And because you're also okay, everybody knows you're leading AI expert from Senegal, but you're the director of the program Open Training for Reinforcement of Competencies for Employment and Entrepreneurship in the Digital Sector, FORCE-N. Sorry. Thank you for that and for being with us and so bringing it up to the governance level.
Thank you, Frederic. Hi, everyone. In the context of governance of AI in the judiciary sector, it's important to think about the impact that could be on human beings, so in this sector. So just to emphasize some significant aspect we can consider in the governance. First, it's about transparency and explainability, because it's important when you use AI system to deliver a sentence or something like that, to explain how what is the process to arrive to this conclusion. So it's important to have the explainability and the transparency to have the decision-making process. And second, it's about fairness and bias mitigation. We all know about, I don't know if you know Compass. There's a study which shows that in Compass there is some bias because of the data used to train the system. So when you use data could have bias because of the cultural things or something like that, it can show a bias in the delivery of the sentence. So it's important to think about it when you're doing the governance. Another thing is accountability and responsibility, because AI system is built by engineer, it can be delivered by company and used by judges or something like that. So in the global chain of the decision-making process, you should have a governance of how to think about the accountability of each stakeholder. Another thing is data privacy, because when you use data for training, you have to use real data. So it's important to think about how to deal with that, the data privacy and the security of the data, the security of the system too. It's important. The other thing is, in some cases, it's important to have human. So the human oversight of the process. It should be guaranteed, and you should have the human control too, not automatic system doing all the process. One thing important is about standardization, because it's important to have some standards. So we have to think about it when we have the regulation or something like that. And the other thing is the certification. So when the AI system is built, it's important to think about how to certify that this is a good system which can be used in the process. So it's very important. And what thing to think about on governance is how to build public trust. Yeah, it's important because when you use it, we have to have the public trust and the public engagement if you want to use a system like that. And another thing is interoperability and compatibility with systems, because usually the system is not a standalone system, it is a system communicating with other systems. So it's important to have these norms, standards, and something like that. And the cooperation too, international cooperation, or if it is in the US, it could be between states to share good practices, to learn about failure of good things happened there. And last but not least, I want to emphasize about ethical guidelines, because at the end there is human being using this system. So it's important to have ethical guidelines who will be shared between all the stakeholders. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Seydina. And you closed on the ethical guidelines. Thank you for that. It's opportune, but you mentioned bias, accountability, the multiple hands problem. So we don't, I mean, it's an entire chain with accountability and responsibilities, human oversight, standardization, interoperability, and so on. They're all in the ethical guidelines, 2 dimensions, as many of you might know. And it is good to look I mean, at all the different AI applications and areas through this lens. And I think it is a very good translation of that. Thank you for that. And now we will also go, and I will hand over to Frigyes Futár, who is the Executive Director of the Mauritius Emerging Technologies Council, and he has spent much of his career in and on the African continent working with leaders of organizations across different areas on leveraging the potential of technology. And it is really great as an example because it gives us also a country application perspective. So over to you and to share.
Thank you, Cedric. Hello, everyone. Maybe from our side, I'm not a legal expert per se, more technology side. So when we think about the applications of AI in the judiciary system, Africa has a tendency to leapfrog technology. So we kind of see what's happening, we test things and do things. So on our side, one of the things that I shared earlier with you that we did was to create a sort of a private GPT that is an expert in the labor laws of our country. So it basically knows everything about the Workers' Rights Act of our country, still on the test phase, but the results are actually extremely surprising and pleasant. Just to give you a scenario of its application, what we did was, one of the things that does happen in a lot of countries, including Mauritius, is a lot of people that actually lose their jobs or end up trying very hard to find the right legal counseling, the right legal support, to ensure that their rights are followed and everything is applied. So now imagine this scenario where you have in your pocket a chatbot that can actually guide you on that. So you basically share the information of, I've been working for X amount of years with this company, this is the salary I was earning, I've now recently been told to leave for the bidder reasons. Is the compensation that I receive correct or not? So what we have seen is the AI is able to actually calculate the right amount of compensation that you're supposed to get. While getting this information, it goes even further. You can ask, okay, what are my options now? What am I supposed to do because of that? It will actually tell you, you can write a letter to the HR department, you can actually go to the labor office. Eventually it writes the letter, it gives further recommendation. At the end of the day, what we see now is we are making it a service that is accessible to the public, which is a major issue. We're trying to bridge that digital divide through a quick use of AI in the judicial system. This is what we call it. Obviously, we'll have short-term, middle-term, and long-term planning of how to implement it. But we are trying to move a bit fast, but at the same time being careful about all the regulations and the governance around it. It's not yet released. Obviously, as you can imagine, it will create a lot of questions in the legal field with lawyers, even unions. But this is one of the things that we're looking at least on a country level.
Thank you so much for this concrete example and highlighting already some of the challenges you see ahead coming towards you when launching the system too, very concretely. So just a heads up to all of you, we will hand over the mic to the room soon, but first we will ask those on the panel here to comment, ask questions. We want it really to be a dialogue between experts and the public. So I'm happy to give the floor to any of you, first to question any of you, and then to the public, or to comment, or to compliment.
So I will just repeat the question that I had before for Frigyes. How did they create a system that was able to calculate the amount of damages? Because I assumed that there would be a need to look into case law, etc.
It sounds complex, but it's actually very simple. Our laws cater for very specific things, like the number of months works, and it's very detailed. So once those I would say the rules are inbuilt in the system, it becomes easy for it to calculate that. Obviously, you need to give, I won't go into technicality of things here. I don't think it's the right platform for that. But obviously, you need to give certain rules. Like whenever you need clarity on certain information, it asks for the information back. So in this way, you're ensured that whatever you're getting out is actually referenced. So basically, it just not only gives you the right amount, but also gives you the reasoning behind, which helps the user get an informed decision at the end of the day. Now, this platform is not only meant for citizens, for everyone, but it's also meant for those in the HR departments of organizations, which we were talking earlier. Sometimes those people, they're not bad intentioned, if I can say it that way. It's kind of can be a lapsus or something that they have not seen. We are doing it constantly. So having access to such a tool, AI-driven, can give them the reassurance that they have some kind of, I would say, artificial intelligence backing in whatever they are providing to them.
Yeah, I think that AI could be used widely in paralegal work, but with judge, in what extent could we use AI to help judge doing a job?
Well, many ways are already being tested or are in production. Mostly, I think AI is used now for years in the private sector for drafting, and this is one of the challenges because it can create an inflation of input to the courts. But in the courts, we are using both traditional machine learning and now we're experimenting with generative tools. And traditional machine learning, one of the aspects is speech to text that I mentioned. Then it's allocation of cases, etc. Some of the tasks that are quite simple. But if we limit it to the decision-making process, the highest use that we see is harmonization of existing case law and support to maintaining the historical memory, both on individual and institutional level. For example, we have a number of similar cases that can get decided in a different way just because there is a lapse of memory on the side of the decision makers. There can be a different formulation by the same judge 2 years ago or now, and this can influence the interpretation of case law. So you can use the analysis tools to help you identify and also suggest what can be written. But where it comes to decision making alone, the current president of the Supreme Court once asked me, so if I use a very good GPT and I ask them to write a decision for me, can I ask it to write a decision in this or that direction? So you can see that you cannot rely on that. Of course, it will do that, but ultimately the decision on what goes out is in the hands of the judge.
Maybe just a question for Gregor as well. I mean, is there a role, there's a lot of talk about human-centric AI and the idea that we're actually making people better at doing their jobs and more informed decisions. Is it fair to say that that is the goal that we should set ourselves in terms of designing systems for, let's say, judges to make decisions in a more careful and full way? And can AI play a role there?
Well, definitely, but I would start with looking at what are the actual needs in the system, and these needs are different in different countries or for different stakeholders in the systems. For Slovenia, one of the main challenges is to have a variety of useful language models for Slovene language that can be utilized in different tasks and experimented on. Then we will see what we can use the outcome on. Currently, unfortunately, I think it's only OpenAI's model that's sufficiently good for Slovene language. I think this might change in a matter of weeks even. But then there are other issues. How do you finance that, etc.? But overall, I think that support to procedural fairness that I mentioned before could be one of the key directions.
Just to add, my only please do impact assessments before the use. Thank you.
If I can add, everything that Sedina said before, yes. Everything is already absolved both by CEPES ethical charter and what we did at CAJAI. I think it's, of course, it's necessary, and also risk and impact assessment. When I mentioned the equality of arms, I think it's one of the key aspects that's unique to the balance that is required in the ecosystem of justice.
No, I have my own questions and points, but I would like to give to the public. There are several people who would like to speak. I think with the cameras, it would be good if you come to the front so people on the web can follow you too. And
first of hi. Mary Hickok, Center for AI and Digital Policy. Thank you so much for your inputs. My question is going to be both to Gregor and Vanya, because you both mentioned procurement of AI, and procurement of AI by public sector happens to be a specific research area of mine. So where do you see the process currently in your respective countries or countries of interest? Second is, do you think that could be a single point of failure for bringing in AI systems into the public sector, into the public infrastructure? That shouldn't be there.
Yes.
Yeah, just to expand on that, yes, a little bit. So there is currently, at least in the EU, draft model procurement clauses. So the full, I mean, you can search it online also. So I think it's called the draft EU procurement clauses for both high risk and non-high risk AI. For the procurement in the public sector. My only caveat there is that the whole process that I was mentioning, the impact assessment, is only one line in that procurement process, whereas we as researchers, at least a lot of research community that I speak to, really see the procurement as a point of opportunity to embed some of the safeguards, procedural ones, and even share the burden, if I may say, with the private sector company. So it's not the onus only on the public institution and the capacities and funding on the public institution only, but it's a shared burden then with the public, with the private vendor or those who are interested to sell their product, to actually demonstrate that their product is compliant with human rights, with safety requirements and all of that is needed, right? So yes on both, and no, it's not fully developed yet, but it has huge potential. A couple of cities, including the city of Amsterdam, for example, do already employ that. Helsinki as well. They have good models for procurement of AI that includes these types of clauses. I don't know if you want to expand more.
I mean, we could have an entire conference, I think, on this issue.
We should.
Yeah. I'll just point out a couple of elements related to this issue. One is how do you set up the criteria, especially if you have a small market. How do you set the benchmarks? You need internal knowledge, but how do you get internal knowledge if you're limited with public sector salaries? Then usually European Union countries rely on EU funding, which is provided for the future 5 years, and you need to plan in advance on the basis of the cost that you had in previous 5 years, and how can you do that with AI technology? So there is a bunch of very technical operational issues. But ultimately, It will require restructuring of procurement both on individual, institutional, and public sectoral level in general.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting to dive into also these practical aspects, and thanks for another question. Perhaps you come here so you can
sure.
You can see the panel and you can invite people online.
Thank you very much. My question is for Vanya. Thank you so much for bringing up the importance of doing impact assessments before deploying any AI product. My question, you mentioned the procedural challenges that we have into implementing those tools. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on a specific aspect of these procedures, and it is, according to you, who should be doing these impact assessments?
So definitely the rule of the thumb is the independence of the assessors, right? So if we are talking about public institutions, there needs to be an independent assessment team, whether they are from within the public sector or a combination. There are many possibilities, but they need to. So first of all, they need to have independence of their own, and second, they need to be interdisciplinary. So you cannot have only data scientists doing the impact assessment. You need to have people with a privacy law background or ethics background or domain expertise. If we are talking about developing something for the judiciary, obviously you want to have judges there involved as well. So it kind of has a two-level structure. One is the actual team, assessors team, that is assessing the AI system, and another layer is external stakeholders that need to be consulted, right? So they can also be somebody within the different public institutions or within different bodies that need to be involved as users, but often what is lacking is consultation with those ultimately impacted. So for example, in the case that you mentioned, I would also be interested to hear, whether, for example, the workers, what they would say in, testing these tools or using these tools that you are proposing, whether they had some particular additional input or whether they, saw it as useful or burdensome, or, to what extent the input from the, let's call it the general users or the impacted users was taken into consideration. So these are not quick processes. There are no quick technical solutions to some of these processes, and I think we need to kind of also internalize that and be okay with that some of these will take time and debates, but ultimately it's all for the best result, right?
I would add to that example also that, of course, the users of the system will have to input their salaries over the years, and so there's a privacy dimension to add.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Gandun Gatauk from the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa, in charge of social and human sciences. Thanks for the intervention and for the panel. I have a small question that will go the other side actually of the conversation so far, because you have spoken more of the tool used by the judges to facilitate their work. Now, from a recipient perspective, that is criminality, AI-powered criminality. How ready are the judges to address that as well? That's mainly my question, from anything the use of AI in the cultural and creative industries vis-a-vis intellectual property to any crime that would be committed using AI. How much are we ready to that?
There are more questions, so I ask us to be short. I'm sure as an IP lawyer you would have your views on that too, Vanya.
I wanted to say there's more questions.
Yes, perhaps because we have about 5 minutes, so I wish to collect questions now, and then we have a last round and close for the next session.
Thank you. I'm Cordell Green, Executive Director of the Broadcasting Commission in Jamaica. An observation and a question. I think, Sedina, you raised the question of explainability as a challenge. I would want us to interrogate that a bit, particularly when it comes to the question of access to justice. I happen to believe that understandability is perhaps more the priority for the judicial sector. Explainability sounds very much an engineering concept to me. And I don't know that explaining the mechanism of a complex black box system is going to help access. I think we would be more helpful if people were to understand the decisions and use of AI. After all, that is the very purpose for requiring judges to give reasons for their decisions. And then, Gregor, I think we may have to not run away from some base principles of law, authority, and precedent. We don't take up every journal and everything that is written and offer it in court as an authority. AI, ChatGPT-3, is not a legal journal. So I believe this is really a question about professional ethics and less a question about artificial intelligence. The journals that are considered authorities in law, there is a reason they are considered authorities in law. And I believe we ought to apply the very same criteria to any other mechanism or authority on which we are relying. AI, in my view, is not an exception to that rule. So I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Thank you, Mr. Green. You have support on explainability and authority versus hallucinating AI systems. Yes, so I think there will be several people. Let's take that as a way. I will facilitate the next session, so I have an interest to keep time for once. So let's make a final round.
I will be quick. I will start at the end, and absolutely, and I addressed this issue partially when I spoke about the case law database search, and that we already have a problem because we cannot verify whether providers of not only GPT, but even case law databases, are they comprehensive? Do they include all the case law? Is there something added? Is the data manipulated? You need transparency. And transparency is also the answer to the previous question rather than explainability. You need to know on what data set and on what presumptions was the algorithm or the system based. To the first question, yes, evidence especially is going to be a problem in terms that currently with deepfakes, we can, even just with deepfakes, we can see a problem of how we will evaluate certain evidence that has traditionally been quite solid. For example, voice recordings. But I think this is this cybersecurity game that's been or any security game that's been going on since cat tried to catch the first mouse or the amoeba tried to catch another amoeba. We will develop these tools and other tools will develop.
Thank you so much, Gregor. Now I will give everyone the opportunity in less than a minute to have a few final remarks if you wish.
I'll be very quick, Cedric.
Yes.
On the aspect of criminality, and just one quick point, I think it reminds me of a heated discussion I had with a friend of mine who was a lawyer. We always argue that the law will always play catch-up with technology. And that is probably what will keep on happening throughout the years. We are right now at the very stages around AI, and regulation will catch up. Eventually we'll be surprised along the way. And one of the best scenarios that a friend shared with me that kept me thinking is this year, half of the world, nearly half of the world will go to elections. We all know that. And in the democratic process, just imagine 2 days before elections, we have a series of deepfakes roaming around on every social platforms everywhere. Election day, people have made their mind based on those deepfakes, AI generated, and have casted their votes. Close of elections, the results are out a week later, then they are told those are deepfakes. What do we do? I don't have the answer. I'm just saying those are the scenarios that we probably need to keep on thinking about and keep on moving in terms of regulations. That's it. Thanks, Cedric.
Thank you. So I'm totally agree. Understandability, it's important when you are faced to the judge to understand what the process is. But when you are building the system, it's important to have to have this kind of to explain how the system works, because it's important to have knowledge about the decision-making process, because without that we can have a complete black box, and it's dangerous to have a black box for some kind of AI system in the judiciary system.
Just quickly, because trust was mentioned a couple of times, and I think the final users of all of these tools are, in a way, citizens and individuals. They will not have trust unless we actually provide the procedural safeguards, the explanations, the understanding. So all of these kind of maybe even boring parts of the conversation, because they are less exciting than, you know, building a new AI, but they're very, very important for actual use and then trust building. These are the important governance and implementation building blocks that need to be there, and we need to keep reminding everybody that these boring conversations need to happen and need to be extended. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanya. John?
Just to pick up on the explainability, I completely agree very strongly. In fact, my feeling is that if we're thinking about, we should be thinking about systems, AI systems being human-centric. And by that, I mean that they should be, in some sense, educational. They should be enhancing the understanding of the human operator in terms of perhaps dimensions that they had overlooked, but in terms of deepening their understanding of the background, of the context, of the possibilities, for example, that could influence this particular decision. And through that, they are actually making that decision a richer decision. And so they're enhancing the ability of the decision to be made in the correct way.
Thank you so much. And I would just to say that on AI and elections, we will have a MOOC coming out just next month, because it is very timely when half of the world's population is going into elections and there are real risks. And we are also speaking about how to address some of these risks. We will have also, I mean, I have one printout. It is available online if anybody wants that. We will publish in March also guidelines on the ethical use of generative AI in the judiciary. We did a survey on users to the 35,000 members of this network, and how do they actually use generative AI, and developed some guidelines in this domain too. And I would like to thank, and I hope you join me in applauding these the panelists. And thanks to the public too for having a very interactive discussion, and I hope it was as enriching for you as it was for us. Thank you. And there's a session now following on MIL, Media and Information Literacy, just to say, which is of course a key important aspect of AI governance, of how to deal with generative AI, and we'll launch policy guidelines in this domain. You know? So it's really an opportunity for you to stay on if you can. Otherwise, thank you for joining. sessions, or the last session before closing, and a parallel session. I have been just at 4 o'clock. We were just a few, so I went upstairs and got a mic finally to announce this session. And I hope that the room will be even fuller. But I'm very delighted to see that you made it for really one of the most important topics, I believe. Many of you are aware of these guidelines. We had more than 10,000 people putting in and contributing to the guidelines launched just in November of last year, just 3 months ago in UNESCO. These are the guidelines on the governance of digital platforms. And it is about how to do the magic of governing online platforms and ensuring freedom of expression at the same time, and addressing all the challenges and risks people are facing in terms of disinformation and hate speech. And particularly in a year of elections like this, there are many different scenarios of how also generative AI can intervene into democratic processes. And there are many challenges we will speak about today. And in these guidelines, there's an explicit reference to media and information literacy. And today, you will be part of the launch of the policy brief on media and information literacy and generative AI, which is this one. So it is online today. Oops. That's an early printout. We will have printed versions soon of that too. So this is the launch today, the launch session. And we have the privilege of having a distinguished panel with us. And one of the panelists is Davina Meeks, who is also the author of these guidelines on user empowerment through media and information literacy responses to the evolution of generative AI. And we will, and the main author of this policy brief. And we have Luciano to my right.
You brought a 20-year-old photo of mine, so people are not really recognizing.
That's him. We use generative AI. So, who is ambassador and director of the Departments for Science, Technology and Intellectual Property at the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he is also a key coordinator for the G20, which Brazil is chairing this year. And we have also to our right Alexandria Walden, who is Google's global policy lead for global human rights and free expression, and Mr. Marko Milosavljevic. Say again, please.
Milosavljevic.
That's what I wanted to say. Sorry for that. And he's professor and chair of journalism and the Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Ljubljana. So we managed to have you on the panel. On one hand, well, the author and academia, but also government and private sector. And that will be an exciting discussion. But to lay the grounds for the discussion, I invite Davina to introduce us to these guidelines, please, or policy.
Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, everybody, for being here after 2 intense days. I'll try to make the guidelines light. Though if you look at the policy brief, it's heavy reading in spite of it being 16 pages, because UNESCO always requires to look at the opportunities and the risks. But if you remember, a year ago, almost exactly, we were all in panic mode. Not only us, but the very inventors of AI. Remember? Existential risk, pleading for AI governance, etc. And I'm glad to say that I think we are beyond this stage now, and I had the feeling in this whole conference that we were more at the level of taking stock and thinking more of implementation. And maybe that's a part of the guidelines that I'll insist most about. But it's true that when we were assessing with UNESCO what was going on with AI, was it a panic, was it real? Where was the real panic? Is it about existential risk, or is it about some people left behind? We decided that, in fact, it was about users and citizens. And I insist, not just users, because in terms of regulation and governance of platforms, you can see that, for instance, Google has come out with guidelines on AI literacy. They're all user-oriented, and it's normal. They are a company. They are about how to use better Bard, Gemini, etc., etc. what about citizens? What about everyday users in their everyday life who are not going to be computer scientists, for whom AI is yet another requirement, it's a professional requirement? What about us in everyday life? What about us going into a supermarket and seeing, for instance, a certain number of cans of soup, and there's one of them, a lot of them by now, cans of soup you've noticed, and say where they've been made, what are the ingredients, if there's gluten or not gluten, what are the risks, etc., etc. What they expect us at the moment in terms of AI is a kind of soup that just says, trust me. It's a black box and you have to accept it. Now, from the perspective of the citizen, this is not an acceptable answer. And so the need for oversight, the need for control, the need for an individual's mastery about what AI is about in everybody's life, that is not black box. It has to be transparent, it has to be trustworthy, it has to be appealed, it has to be actionable in case of abuse and bias, which we know by research that it exists. So this policy brief is totally about user empowerment from a perspective of citizens, which is why we look at all the advantages for citizens. There's no need, we're not going to throw that soup, that kind of soup in the garbage, but we are going to see what positive uses we can have, and also look at the risks. And unfortunately, we are in election years, and as you know, about half the population in the world is going to go to elections, and we know already that people get trapped by fake news provided by a new event in media, because we don't pretend at UNESCO CI to deal with all the aspects of AI. It's not about AI in health. It's not about AI in space. It's about AI in democracy. It's about AI in decision-making and in public opinion building and shaping. And we have a new type of media that we have to take into account, which are synthetic media. If there is a novelty that we have to take into account as users, voters, electors, is that there are some media that are only synthetic. Which is to say, the pictures they show have never been taken anywhere. They cannot be traced by Google AI, by any retrieving system. The texts and documents, the candidates, etc., don't exist in real life. For the first time, we have no correspondence anywhere with real life. Exciting in science fiction, a bit worrying in the reality of everyday decision-making. But so people now are having yet another layer, and maybe we'll talk about media and what happens to them, but another layer of media to take into account. And research shows, and if you follow NewsGuard, and NewsGuard follows how many fake news and how many fake synthetic media exist, they grow by the day. So we have to train people to recognize this. We have to train citizens to be aware of that, use them maybe for some good purposes, maybe not. In any case, this is the why. We have to go into AI literacy, algo literacy, data literacy. In fact, data, algo, and AI literacy are all part of the same subset. And everybody agrees. Everybody I talk to in the guidelines, etc., it's obvious. Yes, AI literacy, media literacy. And then everybody leaves the room. It's done, checked. How do we go about it? How do we make sure that more and more people who are far away from education, from literacy, and yet have to make the choices of voting, etc. How do we make sure that these people are engaged and embarked in this new world in which we are going? And so the proposal in this brief, you don't have to adopt it, it's a proposal, it's a policy brief, is that the last thing you want to tell people, and especially teachers, educators, journalists who are dealing with this synthetic media, the last thing you want to tell them is you have to train in this new literacy, in this black box stuff, and jump there. We know by research it doesn't work like that. Teachers won't go into AI literacy if they don't feel trained. Same thing for journalists. So the proposal here is to come from a principle of familiarity. People are more and more familiar with media and information literacy. States like France, European Union have adopted it as one of the pillars to fight disinformation, together with fact-checking. Many other countries and regions have followed suit. UNESCO has a very strong history of media and information literacy. They have just strengthened that sector and created literally a new unit about it. So there are resources. There are people who are trained. There are MOOCs and online courses that allow people to catch up and scale up. There are even MOOCs for policymakers, because policymakers are among the ones who need to be most trained, because they have to take decisions about something they don't know. They're just like teachers. Are they going to go and make decisions about something that's out there and that they don't know about? If they're responsible, I think they'll hesitate. So the idea is build on what we already have and step it up. So the proposal is to include this AI literacy as part of media and information literacy because of a key notion of information that we all share in all the different cultures of data, of information, of media, and because of these synthetic media that are coming to challenge us. So this was the first idea. And then, of course, when you start talking about that, the how becomes clearer. Oh, we have to design curricula. Now, the two things that come out of this, the brief and the research coming from experiments from other colleagues, etc., is that there are two design principles that are absolutely necessary to add in the traditional media literacy design. One of them is explainability. Explainability is what allows you to put a label on the can. It says what quality of data have been taken in the input, what quality of data is out there, the source reliability. I mean, we can think of a criteria that can be put in explainability. And again, don't let anybody tell you you cannot explain what AI, generative AI does. We know now there's even ChatGPT in reverse that allows you to find back the different processes, the different branchings of, etc., etc. And yes, we understand that it can be a commercial secret. But nonetheless, the companies, in terms of regulation and platform regulation, have to be able to say, what are the data in entry? Do they respect a certain number of ethical principles, including the ownership of those who produce those data, the consent of those who produce those data, and the rights to appeal and to audit? These are the key elements of explainability that you as policymakers and regulators can require, and that we as citizens and users need to be empowered to trust and to engage. The second element that I'd like to put in is not just explainability in terms of the design and how we go about it. Please take it into account in your policy making. It's that we are more and more going to have to interact with non-human actors, non-human agents, robots, bots of different kinds. And we are not trained for that. We tend to project our emotions and our empathy on ChatGPT or on all these different robots. We think that they hallucinate They don't hallucinate. They make goddamn mistakes. They're intelligent. They're not intelligent. They are a statistically powerful engine driven by energy that can actually one day fail us. Thank you out there. Are you sure you're not a robot? Anyway, so we have to stop the marketing tools with critical thinking about why are the marketers of AI pushing the anthropomorphic approach? Why are we accepting that machines are supposed to share emotions, feelings, etc., when they do not? I mean, ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT will tell you, I am a machine, I don't feel. But if you keep a marketing buzz about that, you're going to be trapped. And if you're a young person, even more, because if you start very early, you're going to be acculturated to that and never question it again. So for policymakers, AI literacy starts at year 0. Okay, 1. But parents, as you know, put a lot of these machines in the arms of children very early. And so absolutely start early, often in disciplines. I am actually advocating for a change in curricula where media and information literacy is part of the core curriculum. And the last thing is, you regulators can regulate all you want. If your users, your voters, are not trained to apply and implement your regulation, it will not be used. So in the EU, we have this beautiful AI regulation coming out. It talks about transparency. It doesn't mention once education, media literacy. It doesn't mention the empowerment of users. It is assumed by the policymakers, but it remains too abstract for them to be engaged, to engage their people. So it is absolutely necessary in the design of media literacy and AI literacy to put in there the last element, the last brick, which is the law, the regulation that exists, and how users, citizens can be empowered to use them. So this is basically the 16 pages in 5 seconds or 5 minutes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Davina, so much for... Yes, for explaining so concisely the approach, the design principles, with highlighting explainability, the importance of education, and how to deal with non-human agents. And of course, you said also that everybody can agree to MIL in principle, yes. But what are we really doing? And in our multi-stakeholder approach, we're looking at different government, private sector, and so on, solutions, approaches, policies. And I hand over to Luciano to tell us more about the policy approach of the Brazilian government to deal with the phenomenon of synthetic media, as Davina just highlighted, but also more about the media information literacy approach, please.
Well, thank you, Cedric. Well, I think we, as was outlined here, we are talking about something that is necessarily part of a broader toolkit. I think, from our perspective, dealing with this phenomenon is not possible to be based on a single policy component. So, in the Brazilian perspective, we're talking about something that's, let's say, multi-pronged, but that has one of its main components, MIL, for sure. And I think we're very much aligned with UNESCO. As you know, we participated strongly in the discussion of the guidelines. Mm-hmm. And that's for a reason. We see this issue within the context of the promotion of information integrity. And under this concept that we think we have to address several issues related to how to promote and support information integrity in different fields, in different domains, through different tools, depending on context and situation, the kind of problem that we are specifically facing. Brazil, and then MIL is part of this effort, and Brazil launched a comprehensive media education strategy in October 2023. I must say that it does not focus on specific AI use cases, but it analyzes in detail the context in which it must be implemented, including AI systems and generative AI in particular. The strategy is very much centered on the notion that we must build critical knowledge. So that's the basis. I think that's the centerpiece that links all the elements of the strategy as a tool to face the various challenges AI presents. It points in particular to the need of transparency of AI systems, of course, and social responsibility of AI actors at a time when generative AI tools seem to be moving towards even greater opacity in some respects. We know that coming years will bring an even more disruptive transformation in the expected emerging capabilities in the next generations of language and multimodal models that are already incorporated into chatbots, simultaneous translation, automatic creation of multimedia and content applications, among other applications. Therefore, from a perspective, we must seek that these artificial intelligence tools, which will soon mediate much of our contact with information consumption and the digital environment itself, are trained in a way, in a fashion that are able to provide clear and reliable explanations about their own internal operating mechanisms. So I think the discussion of transparency and explainability is in the core of what we must to achieve in this conversation. And of course, it's something that's not within the sole capacity of governments. And then I think the strategy conveys the clear message that MIL programs are an essential piece in the toolkit to address the challenges and impacts of AI and of generative AI in particular, but that there is not enough. So we must address this in a broader way. In this kind of comprehensive approach that we think is necessary to address those issues, in addition to MIL, we believe that certain regulatory measures may be necessary, and that comes again when we discuss explainability, for instance. There we need political policies to promote integrity of information, including diversity and sustainability of journalistic sources and for journalism in general. That's something that is crucial for this effort. And also that we need non-judicial mechanisms for accountability and promotion of rights. When it comes to regulation, something that I wanted to mention in this regard, that we believe that it's necessary to deal with and to consider as high risk certain systems. So large-scale, massive-scale systems that produce, curate, diffuse, spread and recommend and distribute news content and public interest information should be seen and considered as high-risk systems, and therefore would require specific regulatory approaches. We also believe, and I think that's something that must be discussed in technical terms as well, how it's possible, when it's possible, and that requires engagement with several actors in the system, that there should be obligation in terms of watermarking of certain content, and also record of origin of content that is built or significantly modified by generative AI. We also, something very much in consideration in Brazil, is electoral legislation, electoral law, should restrict the use of AI with the objective of creating confusion and manipulating the electoral process. And that's something that's very much in consideration in Brazil, and we have heard the president of the electoral court that in the case of Brazil, they have powers to regulate the electoral process, so it's very likely that they may have some specific legislation on this before for the election that we have in Brazil this year. So just to conclude, I think it's clear in our perspective that we need a comprehensive approach on this. And it's also clear that this disruption provoked by AI applications, in particular generative AI applications, point to a very challenging scenario. And most likely, the tools that we have available right now may not be enough to ensure an environment that is, let's say, governed by information integrity. So something that hopefully we can move along and find the right answers along the process. Thank you, Cedric.
Thank you, Luciano. That was really an exciting introduction, and I think with some aspects it would be a better world that some of these approaches and would be already applied. You outlined a holistic approach and linked it to the information integrity concept, and highlighted the need for transparency, explainability, accountability, for the critical, the necessity to build critical knowledge, and regulatory measures too. And so that's an interesting thing. And we will open up after first round here also to you. So get ready for some questions. I will ask you to come here so that online participants can see you too, if you want to address any of the questions to our panelists. But now I hand over to Alex first. Over to you. I think you're most welcome to also contradict or complement, other panelists. We heard some things, which you might agree on, disagree on, but everybody agrees on MIL to start with. No?
That's right. That's right. Well, first, yes, thank you for including Google on this panel. These issues are sort of very close to the things that we hold dear and value at Google. And maybe I'll start there because I think, when we think about our commitment to these issues, it really starts at the top of the company from our mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That informs all of the ways we have thought about AI and continue to think about generative AI as we implement it across our products. We also have a long-standing commitment to human rights grounded in the UN Guiding Principles in Business and Human Rights, as well as things like the Global Network Initiative Principles, which are multi-stakeholder principles focused on freedom of expression and privacy. That has also long informed our work, and we do independent assessments as part of that, again, continues to help us improve. And then we have our AI principles. We were one of the first big companies to launch AI principles. We did so in 2018, and those principles include things like ensuring that the work we do is socially beneficial when it comes to AI, and then also things that we call our red lines, which ensure that we aren't doing anything to develop or deploy AI that contravenes international law and human rights. So those are just some kind of big picture kind of commitments and principles that we have inside of Google that inform the ways in which we think about the types of AI that we deploy across our products, what we sell, and then of course the ways in which we engage with stakeholders and the broader ecosystem to address harms as they occur. So, just thinking about sort of information literacy, the topic of this panel, this is one where we've long engaged on this topic in particular. AI is something Google has been working on for over 2 decades. As you know, if you use Google Search or Maps, or if you use Smart Compose in Gmail, these are features that have long existed and continue to improve. And so we've been thinking about what are the policies that we have on our products, how do we continue to improve the features and their accuracy, how do we, when we're making an error, allow for users to understand what the process is for them to make an appeal and alert us to an error. So, we've heard a lot about governance across the past few days, and obviously that's really important to be happening across the ecosystem, but also very important to be investing in inside the company, and we've been doing that for a long time. We recognize that it's sort of one company alone can't be the kind of solution, that it requires all stakeholders to participate, and we need to do our part. So of course there's a role for government, there's a role for journalists and teachers and citizens, but then also companies. And so one of the first things that we did was, I guess now it was maybe 7 years ago or so, we launched something called Be Internet Awesome, which was a digital citizenship training for kids, essentially, about how they should use the internet. And we've continued to build on that work. And last year, when we improved and kind of began to implement generative AI into search, we launched something called, it's basically an AI literacy guide for search. And that's focused on teen users, meant to help them understand the ways in which they might be engaging with content on the internet and in our products, to make sure that they are kind of being smart about how they engage. And so it is really important for us to develop tools, collateral, and resources for the users themselves, but not just the users. It's also important for us to think about how we're educating developers, because they're sort of an intermediary in the process. And so whatever it is that they're developing and how they're using our products to develop new things, they should understand what good practices are as well. And so when we're thinking about tools and resources, developers are another audience that both have a responsibility, but we have a role to play in making sure that they're educated about what good practices are. I'll stop there. I'm happy to talk more about it, but I just want to underscore that I think in this area in particular, there is a lot that we have done and certainly still more to do, and partnership is an important part of that, but that there's a role for everyone in living up to what these guidelines aspire to.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you also for contributing actively to the guidelines and here also to the implementation of the ethics recommendation. So we value, the private sector and the multi-stakeholder approach in UNESCO is built in. And it makes only sense if all forces pull together. And you highlighted all the work Google has done in terms of error appeals, address harms, and so on. And we might hear more from everybody about that too. But before that, I hand over to Marco, who is really, as I mentioned, looking also at the question to which extent MIL should be part of the core competencies of journalists today, and what it means really also to overcome new technological challenges in journalism education. I hand over to you, please.
Thank you. First, about the MIL, let me put it this way. Recently, we tried to do this in 3 different forms and in 3 different levels. We worked with Council of Europe as a member of expert group on the adoption of guidelines for the responsible use of AI in journalism and newsrooms. We are working on a large European Horizon project, Diacomet, which is looking into self-regulation, ethics, and ethical responsibility regarding MIL, AI, and all the other relevant aspects. And currently we're analyzing approximately 300 codes of ethics within EU regarding journalists, PR people, politicians, and many others to find out the shared ground, but also, of course, all the differences between different stakeholders and so on. And the third level, so to speak, is a national level, where I'm happy to say that Slovenia has recently presented its new draft law on mass media, which is, in my information, the first draft law, at least, that will regulate generative AI in media and not just in journalism. I hope that this will be sort of adopted, merely to sort of present the first step towards that proper regulation, which in my opinion needs to be done. Now, when it comes to the skills and teaching of journalists and the others, I had a project recently interviewing many editors of digital and other newsrooms around the world, from New York Times to Guardian and Deutsche Welle and so on. And the former editor of digital at Guardian, Aaron Pilhofer, said something very interesting. He said, if your job can be taken away, if you're a journalist and your job can be taken away by AI, then you should ask yourself whether that was journalism in the first place. And sometimes I think of this also in terms of conferences, I must say. So, if something can be sort of prepared in advance by ChatGPT or talking points and so on, then I don't think that people will like that conference and go on. So I have something that I want to ask you, and that is that you cross your arms. Can you cross your arms, please? It won't hurt, I promise. But just cross your arms. And now cross it the other way around. Yes. What usually happens is that we do certain things almost automatically within half a second. And whenever you want to implement a change, you need time and you need to have some will. That happens in politics. That happens in user experience when you're a private company. Whenever Google or Facebook changes something, everybody is against it. And of course, that happens also in journalism. The people prefer the old ways because it's sometimes easier. But I can also tell you that recently, because of all the things that have happened to journalism, I've seen that a lot of people have, in a way, adapted to that. They have adapted also to the cruel reality of, let's say, algorithms. Today, you will see very little of previous poetic headlines in the media. Sometimes you would have a comment that would be titled, "For whom the bell tolls, the unbearable lightness of policymaking," or whatever. And now that's all gone. It's all gone mostly because of the company over there, Google. It's not your fault in a way, but the Google doesn't like poetic headlines. They like certain keywords, and they like names, and they like people. And if you looked at the headlines a few days ago after Grammys were given in the US to music industry, you would have the impression that Taylor Swift was the big winner, because Taylor Swift was in every single headline I could see almost about the Grammys. And she was on almost every single picture from US, UK, Germany, France, and so on. She was there basically because of the algorithms, because the algorithms prefer big names and big stars, and they put you on top. The actual big winner of Grammys was a person called Phoebe Gransma, a girl from a band called Boy Genius. She won 4 Grammys. Miley Cyrus won 2 major awards, bigger than Taylor Swift. But the algorithms dictate what is happening today in the newsroom. They dictate what kind of headlines we get. They dictate also what kind of pictures are posted and what kind of pictures cannot be posted. And that is why I believe that MIL should always be put in the context and in combination with the governance, the importance of governments, the importance of clear rules, of transparency, accountability, not to have this sort of black box, but to have a sort of transparent box as much as possible. And of course, to have some responsibility. You mentioned small children, and AI-generated images will have even worse effects on children than the current trends of sort of photoshopped, filtered photos on Instagram had on small kids. They can have devastating effect. And we've seen that those devastating effects also last week with Mark Zuckerberg in Congress facing parents of kids who died because of the cyberbullying or some other social media related issues. So in my opinion, media literacy is extremely important. We are implementing it. We should implement it not just for journalists, we should implement it for politicians. If you check the European Media Freedom Act, you won't see a word journalism almost anywhere in the document. It's about service providers. It's about content creators and so on. The journalism is in a way gone from some of the documents, which I think is not good, because journalism has a special role. Like users are different from citizens. Users are a sort of market-driven topic. Citizens are something general, and it's same with journalism versus other content creators. So it could be implemented in, and it should be in a way adopted in many ways. So that is for me from now.
Thank you so much. I think there would be many things to be said, and thank you for highlighting both or 3 points related directly to media information literacy. Please, people, participants, get ready to ask a question, and if you want, please come to the front so people online can see you too, and I will hand you the mic. But here, just to highlight that you highlighted media and information literacy in journalism education, also the law, the draft law being prepared, but also some of the realities. And I think, for example, the Taylor Swift might be attention might also be linked to the fake porn pictures which were there during that time and were taken down afterwards. But there is also another link to that too. You mentioned cyberbullying also as an important other aspect. Is there any of the participants who would like to ask a question to the panelists before I do? Yes, can you come to the front so that, please, so that that you can speak? You know, so yeah, yes. No, so it's just so that online participants can see you and can hear you well. Thanks for that. And please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jayant. I am currently working in a cross-agency UN project on AI. My question is both oriented towards the private sector representation here, but also the policy aspects of it. We are hearing a lot of tools like watermarking being discussed, but there's also a lot of research which shows that it can be altered with and it's not foolproof. And Google, even before US came out with any sort of formal legislation, developed its own policy about inauthentic content and political ads. So my question is, especially from a policy-making perspective, is that the answer? Because a lot of this control will, at the end of the day, be through the digital platforms which are distributing the content, even if they're not generating the content. So do you need these sector-specific guidelines and regulations? Would you require, for example, any company which distributes ads, like political ads, to have this as a formal sort of regulation, instead of relying on things like watermarking, which is not foolproof? So the blend of two, and also what would be the reaction from the private sector? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are collecting 2-3 questions and then handing over to the panel. Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm Oliver Marsh from Algorithm Watch in Berlin, Germany. Very quick question. I was wondering to what extent your various work has built on, learned from, or intersects with particularly the Digital Services Act in Europe.
Hello, I'm Katharina Zügel from the Forum on Information and Democracy. So one approach to tackling disinformation, the loss in trust in the information world is by pushing out or recreating a trustful system. One, there's all the work about content authenticity and provenance, but what role, like what other elements are there, and what role do you see on the one hand for the private sector, but also for regulation to create again a trustworthy information ecosystem?
Good. Okay, we take the last one now. And then we'll have another.
Thank you. Domen Savic, Citizen D NGO from Slovenia. So welcome to Slovenia, guys. I have a question regarding the media aspect of the current implications for artificial intelligence, media literacy, or artificial intelligence literacy in regards to other existential threats that are being present in the big platform moment. So in my opinion, we're talking too much about deep fakes that have yet to prove its significance in regard to disinformation, but we're completely almost neglecting the issue of, let's say, surveillance advertising. That has been here longer, let's say, than the issue of deepfakes and still hasn't been resolved. So I would like you sort of to hear your thoughts on the issue of media flashiness of the current threats, forgetting everything that we're leaving behind almost unresolved. Thank you.
Thank you. So a number of topics and issues. Who wishes to respond first? Alex.
Why not? I can touch on a few. The question about watermarking and sort of how valuable is that? From Google's perspective, you know, that is an area that we've been working on for a long time, and we think that it's important to continue to invest in both watermarking and then things that we've started to test out, like this product we have called SynthID, which has begun rolling out to our cloud customers. Similar to watermarking, it's about identifying images that are generated. I think when it comes to this issue, there's not going to be any single solution. There's no panacea. We have to, from the tech company side, continue to experiment and innovate around ways that we can get ahead of how bad actors might manipulate our platforms and services. And that's something we've long been doing, and we fully expect to continue to do that when it comes to generative AI and manipulative media and users. So again, like, I think it's important for us and other companies and other actors in the ecosystem to continue to invest in things like watermarking, but it won't be the be-all, end-all. And also, you know, this is maybe more, I don't remember, I was taking notes on the questions. To the question about the intersection of DSA, but this also gets to the first question too. One of the important things about DSA is it really focuses on the company's governance of these issues. What are the systems we have in place to deal with, consider, identify, and address harms related to content issues? And many of those issues are ones that we're seeing in the generative AI space as well. So thinking about, does your company have a way to create policies for its products? Is it informed by stakeholders and other experts when you develop those? Do you have transparency and accountability and appeals, all of, and research, access for researchers, and are you doing your own internal research and UX research? All of those things are things that come up in the context of DSA that will be relevant for the work that we're doing on generative AI broadly. I'll stop there because I know others will have input on the other questions.
No, just a point I wanted to mention. I think we're aware that there are technical issues, those sorts of solutions. But in the end, I think every little helps, because I think critical knowledge and critical thinking will go until a certain way. The problem I see is we have nowadays a situation where people are well informed. If they are well informed, if they can understand their technical environments, can understand that things may not be true, they can be skeptical about it. But there's a landing zone where you can have a critical skepticism that converges with a non-critical skepticism. People just think, no, that's not true. That may not be true. And you don't really want to know if it's true or not. So somebody that's really, let's say, capable of thinking about it, let's say, will be a well-informed, skeptical person. But somebody that simply does not want to know will be also skeptical, and nobody knows if that's true or not true. And that plays in the hand of those that are just wanting to disseminate this information and just make a confusion about what's real, what's not real. And so I think if we can move with some technical solutions that even if they're not perfect, can help separate one thing from the other, I think that's something that's necessary, because and that, of course, it's part of a discussion on governance solutions for that regulatory solutions for digital platforms as well. They'll have the responsibilities on this, and that's its system and legislation is dealing with alternatives. But I think that's something that will be necessary to some extent, and hopefully the technical solutions will evolve and will get better. So just this comment I wanted to make.
Yes, I'll try to gather several other questions. My NGO, which is called Savoir Devenir, has a European project, because funding research is part of all this stuff, and the EU has been funding research on media literacy and fact-checking, and there's a line in the Creative Europe program that funds projects on a yearly basis, and that's big because it allows us to see the impact and the evaluation of different media literacy projects. So at the moment we're conducting one called Algo Watch, which wants to make everybody into watchers of algorithms. And we zero in onto algorithms because we think they are the key, and data as well. And we don't want to fall into the trap to start answering your question about where the panic is putting the focus and where the real light should be. GAI needs data and needs algorithms, so we have to present all of these to the public and to learners, and to all learners, because there's two big gaps that are at risk here. One of them is the gap between STEM disciplines, science, technology, math, and humanities. even digital humanities. And if teachers, professors at university, etc., are not trained to methodologies in which they can use AI, the humanities are going to lag behind. And you know what? At the moment, when we talk about intelligence, which is a topic of philosophy, when basically everybody speaks about explainability, and I like to add interpretability, because when you get these data, you have to interpret, and interpretation is very human. We need to strengthen the humanities. They're being cancelled. They're being cancelled. In Florida, sociology is cancelled. So beware of that. Gender gap, research shows that women are left behind. Girls are not supposed to be mechanical, technical, etc. And we have a problem there. So I know UNESCO is particularly watchful about that, but you all have to be. We all have to be. So these are two points that I wanted to highlight. The last point is teachers, educators want watermarks. They don't have time. They don't have time to check. They need their governments, their ministries, etc., to tell them this has been approved. This is safe for you to use in the classrooms. Otherwise, they won't adopt. Business will suffer, users will suffer, citizens will suffer. So the technical tools, smart ones as they're becoming, are important. And that's where teachers need to talk to developers and designers. We developed a project called InVid We Verify, which is a plugin on video verification with teachers. And they said, we don't want to be fact checkers. We don't want to be developers of plugins. We want you to give us a database of verified fakes. And then we'll use them in our practice. You know, they know how to step up, but within their practice. So that's very important. And the last point I want to say to Google and to all the other GAFAMs and the Chinese ones and all the others that in which a lot of other countries are not getting into monopoly, is that, yes, for instance, and please go see the AI literacy guide of Google. You're the first ones to do it, so I'm zeroing on you. Do they mention where they take these principles from? When you look at the guidelines, it doesn't say anything about the UNESCO, the SDGs, the SDA, etc., etc. It's all under terms of contract. It's about us and conditions of use in Google. Fine, but where do we align ourselves as humans? What is this work done by UNESCO, by all these international institutions to which they say they contribute as multi-stakeholders? Where do they show the multi-stakeholder work to people who are going to use it at the everyday level? And that's what I'm saying is, if people are not aware of regulation, of how you align on a common vision of where we want to go, what is the meaning of this AI? What are the end users of AI? At the moment, what I have a feeling is the genie is out of the box. We can do that, so let's do it. And then suddenly we panic. This is not how we're going to win the battle of collective intelligence here. So if you are sincere about aligning on UNESCO, UN values, show it.
Thank you, Davina. Marco?
I have just a few follow-up thoughts also regarding the questions of Sona, but it's sort of, they are kind of mixed up in my head right now. But I would say two important things. We are now discussing, on one hand, deep fakes, generative AI, this and that. I think that we still have to discuss two key aspects of the AI as such within the media or media literacy and so on. One is algorithms and the other is generative AI. These two things, I think, are the key aspects of AI within the media, social media, and so on, and also having a tremendous effect on our democracy. Algorithms. Go to the search engine and check famous artists. Look at Helmut Newton. Look at pictures from Robert Mapplethorpe. Look at Egon Schiele. You will see that their results, that their art is being censored. It is not there. You need to know how to find pictures from Helmut Newton that are probably seemed as, I don't know, corrupted or immoral or so on by search engines, including, of course, Google. But that is giving the wrong impression to our kids. That is giving the wrong impression to our society about the arts. It's giving the wrong impression about many artists. If you don't believe me, go to YouTube and type in Cock Robin. Now, that was a very innocent pop band from the 80s. They had this sort of mistake of naming themselves Cock Robin before the YouTube and everybody else was functioning. But if I'm correct, in most of your telephones, you won't have that as auto-suggestion. Once you type in cock, R-O-B, it will stop. They don't want to show you things that move on from there. They softened that, but until recently, there were similar problems with Marvin Gaye, because he had G-A-Y in his surname. And we had this same issue with famous communication scientists, such as Gay Tuckman, famous literary journalists, such as Gay Talese, and so on. So, of course, you have all these sort of issues with algorithms, as I've mentioned previously, also with journalism. And, of course, there are all these examples also here in Slovenia of pictures being taken down from one platform or another, from the picture of the burning village in Vietnam, or the pictures from Tiananmen, or many other aspects, basically being labeled as this or that. I had a picture of front page of German magazine Max with a picture that was done by Helmut Newton, written on the front page, removed from Instagram in a second. So they can see that that is immoral, but it's a media outlet, and it's a legitimate, like Der Spiegel and so on. It's not, it's a general magazine like GQ magazine or Esquire. And they had a picture from Helmut Newton on the front page, clearly saying Helmut Newton. It was moved down in a second. So there are algorithms showing us a filtered, censored version of reality. And then there is generative AI, which we are talking mostly about in content creation. But generative AI is also the key tool for the ad increase or increase in ad revenues from the platforms. The advertising revenues from Facebook has increased by 16% last year, mostly according to their official sources, because of the generative AI being used in better advertising and individual advertising and targeting and so on. Google has increased its ad revenues by 6%. Both of them combined have the ad revenue of $370 billion US. And then, of course, you expect a few fact checkers in Slovenia, a few in Italy, a few in Germany, a few in Sweden to verify all the content that is there when there is no more or sufficient funding for the media or journalism in these countries, where the governments talk about, like you said, yes, yes, MIL, but then when it comes to financing the programs, the research or media, then of course the problem comes, and that the sort of ChatGPT reactions, like yes, yes, we all like MIL, we all are concerned about AI, but then the problem is what next?
Thank you so much, Marco. I don't know if any of you has a last shot, like one phrase statement to add before we are closing. Would you like Luciano or Alex, or is it good? Okay. So to say what you just highlighted, Marco, is actually really part, and I warmly recommend this today launched policy brief again. You were highlighting just about AI and generative AI, but it is also about algorithm and the engagement of people with information, as you said, and search engines and generative AI now is a way to engage, and it is also about how we highlight here, about control and human agency, and a question around that. And we have spoken today also about user empowerment, about the ethical use of synthetic media, as we started, about disinformation, data privacy, surveillance, explainable AI, source reliability, and many other parts. I really would like to thank you for having participated actively and stayed on until the end. And now we're coming to the closing, and I'm asked to close sometimes too. But I warmly invite you to applaud the panelists here, and I thank you for your active participation in this session.
Time is always short. So. Time is always short.